This video is brought to you by Harold Sack, who gave me a massive 1 year's worth of subscriptions on Patreon. Hello all, I wanted to do something a little bit different this week before the new cards from Dominaria United are released on the channel next week. I'm going to be releasing some loose deck techs on some of the commanders I'm most looking forward to from the set. So let's set this round off with what's likely to be a very popular one in Braids Arisen Nightmare. Braids is a 3-mana mono black 3/3 nightmare that reads, at the beginning of your end step, you may sack an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may do the same, and for each one that doesn't, they lose 2 life and you draw a card. So basically what we want to do with this commander is try our damnedest to control the board and make it really difficult for our opponents to stick permanents that they'd rather have in play, either by forcing edict effects on them, or by drawing into our removal and getting rid of the problem permanents that way. Now, sacrificing our permanents is all well and good, but that obviously leaves us with less permanents in play ourselves, so what's the upside there? The most obvious tactic to go for is generic tokens to sacrifice so you don't lose out much, whilst your opponents potentially lose out on big creatures and commanders and the like. Lolth, Teveshsat and Lily all produce bodies for us as well as providing card draw. Sacrifice one of these in an attempt to get rid of your opponent's walker, and it's likely that you just draw 3 cards. You could get rid of an opponent's walker with Braids, but it's not likely unless they're at a very low life total. The benefit being that you do draw in all of those cards. If you think you're going to lose your planeswalker during the next turn cycle anyway, that could be an option for you. Jadar, Ophiomancer, Weaponcraft Enthusiast and Sengir Autocrat all bring in token sack fodder with them too, meaning that you don't lose the creatures, you instead lose the tokens, but your opponents are going to have a much tougher decision to make there. We've also got some non-token creatures that we don't mind sacrificing and easily bringing back either. Bloodghast is a favourite of mine in black decks because it just goes so well with Skullclamp. Play a fetch, either an inexpensive ones or one of the cheaper ones like Evolving Wilds, and you'll get landfall twice, being able to return and clamp Bloodghast twice in 1 turn. Lots of card draw for no life and very little mana. Nethertraitor is very similar and triggers on your tokens dying too, so it shouldn't be all that difficult to keep this one in play. And reassembling Skeleton is the slowest of these options, but you activate it before your turn starts and make use of it during your turn, so I think it's worth an include here. I was actually considering cutting the Skeleton in order to give Weatherlight Completed a try. I'm really hoping I can get those 7 counters on there and start drawing a bunch of cards when I sack all my creatures. But it's not just creatures and walkers that we're able to sack to Braids. Artifacts and enchantments are difficult to remove in black, and if we're going to be sacrificing ours, then we need to make sure that we benefit from this too. Liliana's Contract, Treacherous Blessing, Demonic Law and Demonic Pact are all enchantments that draw us cards, and can be sacrificed before we see any of the downsides from them. We do need to be careful because if we lose our commander and have these stuck in play, it is going to be really bad news for us, just something to bear in mind. As for the artifacts, we've got your typical Duretti sack fodder in Ecor and Mycosynth Wellspring, Prized Statue and Ugin's Nexus. These artifacts benefit us, some from entry and all of them from being sacrificed. Not to mention it's also likely that we'll cantrip further when we sacrifice them, assuming our opponents have the life to spare. A noteworthy include here could also be some combo pieces like Mere Retriever and Scrap Trawler. Plenty of combos you can look up with these, but I decided to go for more of a whittle your opponents down tactic in this list. Now, I didn't bother putting any beneficial lands in the deck with regards to sacrificing. I just don't think opponents are going to be convinced into sacrificing lands until the late game, at which point it might be largely pointless anyway, as it's likely that they'll just be sacrificing basic lands. The only lands I could find that would benefit us to sacrifice them were Drownyard Temple, God's Eye and Dunes of the Dead. Again, very little benefit for the sake of losing a land. I just decided to include Crucible of Worlds instead, just in case we want to blow up some of our lands to draw cards. Speaking of drawing cards, we have a few more ways to do this that are worth going over. We've already looked at those walkers, Skullclamp shenanigans and the enchantments, but it doesn't end there. Ayara, Fellstinger and Morbid Opportunist all care about sacrificing and help us stay in cards. The latter of which, along with a sack outlet and Ophiomancer, lets you draw a card every single turn too, which is a cool draw engine. Yawgmoth is one such sack outlet and also draws us cards as well as whittling down our opponent's power and toughness. And the underplayed Doomweaver might not draw us a million cards per Soulborn death, but with the frequency at which we sacrifice creatures in this deck, the 1 or 2 cards here and there is really going to mount up. Winding down the deck now, we'll take a look at some of the removal. Again, we see Liliana Dreadhorde General forcing our opponents to sacrifice creatures. This does include us, so that goes nicely with our token strategy, along with Grave Pact or Dictate of Erebos, both of which are also in the deck. Our fourth Planeswalker is Ugin, which is a very useful wrath for when we just have to reset the board. This is a last resort and it doesn't trigger deaths due to the exile, but it's likely that we'll be able to sacrifice all of our creatures before ticking this thing down. Looking back towards those Grave Pact effects, I've also included Massacre Worm here. Whilst it might not completely blow your opponent's side of the board up, it will likely chip their life total away rapidly due to losing them 2 life per creature they have die, as long as the worm is in play. Meathut Massacre is similar in that it's an aristocrat/board wipe effect on a permanent that forces your opponents to deal with it. You'll notice a distinct lack of spot removal in this deck, but I didn't feel as though we needed it because it's just so easy to control the board with our commander and other edict effects. So there we are, that wraps up the first of the deck tech on the channel in a very long time. Hopefully you all enjoyed it and look forward to seeing more this week. A huge thank you to the patrons who have consistently supported the channel and keep me here on YouTube making videos for all of you. If you want to be a patron yourself, then you can follow the link in the description below. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.